Okay, and now on to the other big story.
Beleaguered borrowers have been hit with a fresh interest rate rise today, certain to strain household budgets even further. The Reserve Bank lifting the cash rate to a 9-year high of 2.85%.
Yes, that's right. These days, it's not just the endless floods literally sending Aussie homes underwater. We also have interest rate rises doing it metaphorically.
As borrowers feel more squeezed, house prices keep falling. In Sydney, they're down more than 8% over the past year.
Wow, 8% down from, oh my God, I could never afford that even if I won the lottery. Good luck, first home buyers. Impossible is now 8% closer. So anyways, I bet you're wondering, why is the Reserve Bank inflicting all this pain on Aussie homeowners with mortgages?
This 7th rate rise in a row is an attempt to keep a lid on inflation,
as the RBA board tries to rein in inflation.
Fruit and vegetable prices are predicted to surge by 8% over the next 2 quarters.
Inflation is the number one challenge in our economy. It's the number one focus of the government.
Yes, the Reserve Bank's plan here is to tackle inflation by taking money out of the economy by making people pay more for their mortgages. That means they're less likely to spend money on frivolous things like vegetables, clothes and haircuts. And all this will eventually lead to prices going down somehow. Great plan, right? What could possibly go wrong? This definitely won't lead to a massive recession and higher unemployment and increased homelessness. Right, Reserve Bank? So what are the factors driving increasing inflation at the moment? Well, one of the biggest ones is energy prices, which are only going to get worse.
Electricity prices are forecast to rise by 20% this year and another 30% next year.
Power prices could rise by as much as 50% next year.
Gas up 50% over the next year, electricity 50% over the next 2 years. Now that's disastrous.
Yes, it's so bad it's even going to affect lefties like me who are on 100% renewable electricity. My bill is forecast to go up at least 20% this year, which makes no sense at all because last time I checked, the sun and the wind haven't suddenly got more expensive. Haven't seen Alan Kohler on the ABC put up a graph about rising sunshine prices. No. Only important economic issues like, Taylor Swift.
And 10 days after it was released, Taylor Swift's Midnights has blown the rest out of the water, becoming the most streamed album of all time. And that's finance.
That's not finance. That's you trying to look cool to your kids, Alan. Anyways, what's causing all this energy price inflation? Well, if you haven't heard about it, there's a war on.
Oil and gas prices have been soaring, pushed upwards by Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
The war in Ukraine is having a big impact on energy prices.
Inflation is a worldwide problem right now because of a war in Iraq and the impact on oil and what Russia's doing. The war in Ukraine. And thinking of Iraq because that's where my son died.
Iraq, Ukraine, same thing. Both were illegal invasions by wannabe empires, so it is easy to confuse them, Joe Biden, don't worry. Geez, at least when the OG war crimes mastermind George W. Bush makes the same mistake, he has the honesty to admit it's because he's got old and forgetful.
And the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Right. Anyway, 75.
Anyways, it might seem obvious to you and me that the war in Ukraine is a very bad thing that should end as soon as possible, but it turns out it is leading to increased revenues for energy exporting countries, like, Australia and Saudi Arabia.
7 News can reveal Tuesday's federal budget will include a $100 billion plus revenue windfall, mostly taxes from record coal and gas exports.
To be clear, we're benefiting off the back of Putin's war on Ukraine.
It is very welcome that we've got this near-term boost in revenue coming from higher commodity prices.
But high oil prices have been very good for Saudi Arabia's state-controlled oil company. Its second quarter profit blows away all prior records.
Overnight, Saudi Arabia's Aramco said it had made a profit of $42.4 billion over just 3 months.
Wow, $42 billion in 3 months? That's a lot of bone sores. Meanwhile, the major oil companies like ExxonMobil, BP and Shell have also been making absolutely obscene profits.
Now, we're seeing this kind of boom from other energy companies as well. Exxon and Shell recently posted record second quarter earnings.
Well, BP is the latest oil major to report near record profits with its second highest quarterly earnings ever. And also announced an additional $2.5 billion share buyback.
Yes, good to hear that in these increasingly desperate and impoverished times that high petrol prices are helping out those in our society who really need it. The shareholders. These obscene profits even grabbed the attention of US President Joe Biden, who's promised to look into taxing the oil companies more.
The president has basically said to big energy companies, you are making windfall profits at the moment as a result of the Russian war with Ukraine. And we, the United States, expect something of that back.
Floating a so-called windfall tax on their corporate profits, accusing the companies of war profiteering.
And I want to let you, I'm going to hear more from me about this when the Congress gets back.
Yes, Biden says he'll definitely look at maybe introducing a windfall profits tax when Congress returns after the midterm elections, that, you know, the Democrats will definitely win, right? And also, might I note that introducing such a tax definitely won't come back to hurt Democrats if oil companies raise prices in retaliation, right? No chance of that happening. And it's not just the energy companies making a killing out of the war in Ukraine. There's also all the companies that literally make a killing. Of course, I'm talking about the military and defense companies, and over on all the TV finance channels, the pundits are talking them up like they're a better bet than Kanye doing something racist and stupid.
And you know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about groups like the defense contractors. Thanks to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we are seeing a renaissance in defense spending worldwide.
The huge defense company, Lockheed Martin, that is really starting to profit from all of the global conflict that's happening at the moment.
The two biggest missile producers are Lockheed and Raytheon. They have, sending missiles, javelins to Ukraine, sending NASAMS air defense systems to Ukraine. So the demand looks very good for both of these guys.
And I think the war in Ukraine right now has put a lot of momentum behind these defense stocks.
War is good business for parts of the economy. Historically, it doesn't mean the defense contractors cynically want it. I know a lot of people in these companies, and they're as heartbroken by the war in Ukraine as the next person. But yes, war is good business for certain parts of the economy.
Yeah, that's right. Business is booming for the defense contractors. I bet over there everyone was like, yeah, pop the champagne, boys. Whew. It was a really tough 6 months there between the end of the war in Afghanistan and the start of the war in Ukraine. But by Joe, we got through it, and look at us now. We're back, baby. Even here in Australia, where we're relatively safe and isolated and a long way away from the war in Ukraine, both sides of politics still love splashing billions of dollars on new military toys, like hypersonic missiles.
The government has stepped into the global arms race with plans to acquire Australia's first hypersonic missiles.
Missiles that can be fired from the land, sea or air, and that can travel at least 5 times the speed of sound.
Senior defence officials admit it's an urgent task because China and Russia are already in front with the advanced technology.
The reason we invest in all of these things is to create a peaceful environment and a stable environment in our region, not one driven by conflict.
In this increasingly uncertain and unstable world, we will need to increase Australia's defence spending.
Okay, so if we're going to give defence contractors billions of dollars to build us hypersonic missiles, then we must really need them to potentially defend ourselves from China, right? Sam Roggeveen from the Lowy Institute?
Australia does not need the ability to hit China with a weapon in order to defend itself. In fact, I think it would make Australia more vulnerable, and I think a weapon like that would actually be very destabilising in a crisis.
And these hypersonic missiles are already costing us at least $3.5 billion. Meanwhile, raising JobSeeker to above the poverty line would cost us only $12 billion a year. But, they don't go brum brum. Also, I reckon one reason that politicians seem endlessly addicted to increasing defence spending is that, turns out lots of people own shares in defence contractors. Hell, in Australia, you probably own shares in them without even realising it. Check with your super fund. And in America, lots of politicians do too.
Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia
Records show she bought stock in the defense contractor Lockheed Martin just one day before the invasion started.
Our team here at CNBC dug through financial disclosures from members of Congress and found more than a dozen reported trades, either their own or by their spouse or child, in companies that are directly affected by the war.
Okay, so with politicians, governments, corporations and shareholders all addicted to the billions of dollars they're making off the war in Ukraine, don't expect it to end anytime soon. Or wars themselves, for that matter. In fact, I'd say there's a good reason everyone in government and the media loves talking up a future conflict with China, and that's because
war is good business for parts of the economy.
Which, to quote one renowned expert who inadvertently slept next to a gang of lions on the loose in a zoo this week, feels a little bit...
Ooh, scary.